Daniel, are you there?
Yes.
There you go. Hello? Caller, it looks like we have 2 attendees possibly, caller user 2 and Daniel. Can you hear me all right? Well,
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Is that Daniel?
Yes.
Hi, Daniel. Jennifer Hemper. I'm the academic coach here at Bellevue College.
Hello.
I believe I've sent you a few emails back and forth.
Yes.
Do you know if you are a call-in user 2 as well with your audio component?
I'm trying to fix my audio right now. It's coming off of the computer.
It looks like it is then. Okay. Okay. Well, can you hear us well enough?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. You probably have already met me just via email. I'm the academic coach here. I provide support services per our Health eWorkforce Consortium grant. I kind of explained a little bit about that in my introduction. And I hold a webinar each month on a different success topic, and we try and record these so we have them accessible to other students. And typically our certificate students do attend these webinars, and we're trying to get more and more students involved. But today we have a guest presenter. This is Connie. She's from the Reading Lab on the main campus and works in the Academic Success Center.
That's correct.
And she's going to be giving a talk today on tips for reading your textbook, which I think will be very pertinent and helpful for your online courses as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to her, and she's going to give the presentation.
Okay. Well, hello and welcome, Daniel and all else. Thanks for having me. Again, our topic today is going to be tips for reading your textbook. I'm going to do a little bit of spiel about the Academic Success Center. Here we have a copy of their webpage, www.bellevuecollege.edu, and we also, as you can see along the header, we have drop-in tutoring available for the Academic Success Center. It's on our main campus, room D202. And any class that you have, whether it's biology, psychology, math, English, we have drop-in tutoring available. You can go on to our drop-in tutoring schedule, check out the dates, times, and locations, and if you just need a little bit extra help with your homework or a little bit extra help studying for your tests, you can go to these drop-in tutoring sessions, and it's like an impromptu study group where you'll have at least one tutor who has taken the class and done well in it, or sometimes an instructor, and whoever else is coming and wanting help, and it's just a bunch of students asking questions, getting answers from each other, studying and working together. That drop-in sessions are really successful for a lot of students. We also have a math lab, which is dedicated specifically towards math classes. You go there when you're struggling with your math. If you have a question, you raise your hand. They have tutors kind of walking and floating around who will sit down, find you, and give you some pointers, and then give you some time to puzzle it out a little bit more. And then we have the writing lab, in which if you have a paper or an essay or any writing assignment that you have, you can come to the writing lab. We also have e-tutoring, which I think could be helpful for our online students. And again, any help. Most of the time it's grammatical, but it's not just, here, we're going to edit your paper and give it back. You get 30 minutes to work with a tutor to kind of work on your problem areas so that you don't make that mistake again. And then, of course, we have the reading lab, which hosts workshops. And that's what we're going to work on today. So when you look at your textbook, when you look at this big, giant behemoth of a book, you know that it's a lot different than our Twitter feeds. It's a lot different than our favorite novels. It's a different textbook. It's a different type of literature altogether, and it requires a different approach. So one thing that I really encourage everybody to do is to look before you read. Really take a look at whatever chapter you're looking at, whatever reading assignment. I got a question for you, Daniel. When you when you have a reading assignment, do you end up flipping through the pages, or do you just kind of dive right in and start reading?
I kind of dive right in.
You're like me. I do that too. But unfortunately, that's kind of a bad habit of mine. It's a really smart idea to kind of flip through it and see, like, how many pages you have. A lot of students, sometimes when we look through it, we go, okay, how many pages does it have? Are there any pages that have a lot of pictures on it, so there's only like this much text? That's a great first step for looking and previewing your text. We call it previewing. So I want to show you a little bit of what I look for when I do it, actually, for a test. So I actually have here with me my husband's physics textbook. I never took physics. I took, like, art history and literature. Can we see that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm looking at chapter 13, and this is the very beginning of chapter that talks about fluids. And I noticed at first that it's got 4 sections, like subsections, and it's got an introduction. So if I scan the introduction, I'm looking, it's got this bold point right here. We begin the chapter by studying fluids at rest, followed by the study of steady state flow within an emphasis on laminar flow. So I don't know what state flow is. I don't even know what laminar flow is. So I know that I'm going to have to figure that out. That's something that I'm going to need to know by the end of reading this chapter. So I'm looking through it some more, and I see, okay, there's section 13.1, and I'm looking on to the next page. Oh, there's 13.2, so that's a pretty short section, and lots of pictures. Wow, section 13.2 is pretty long. Okay, so when I actually get to reading it, I know that section 13.2 is bigger. There's section 13.3, and that's also pretty long, and there's section 13.4. And, okay, I noticed that when I look at the section dividers, there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. I also see that there's examples. So the double bar indicates that that's a section header, but they also have examples. I don't necessarily like the fact that in this particular textbook, the examples are labeled the exact same as the section headers, but at least they're color-coded, red and green, so that's a good indicator. And, but if you're colorblind, that's kind of an issue. And they have, like, again, section headers. That looks like they have picture of the problem. They have lots of nice graphics. Oh, every time there's an equation, I see that there's, like, it's highlighted in yellow, so that's kind of cool. Okay, so these are ways that can help me, if I really was going to read this chapter, kind of decipher this information, chunk it up. And the one really important thing is to look at that chapter summary at the end. So there's 5 major points. It's a good idea to find the chapter summary at the end of each chapter and look to see what the major points are. Looks like it also has a list of all the equations that I'm going to need, and it's got a ton of practice problems. So if I had just dived in like I normally do, then I wouldn't be able to read these summary questions and kind of figure out and kind of create a map for what the chapter is going to look like. And that way, when I set a path for myself, then that way I can, it's not some brand new information. It's almost like creating stepping stones across a bridge. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so for our audiences, both present and future, I encourage you to take whatever reading you're doing and look through that and see what you can find in your particular text, especially your textbook. Okay. The next thing I recommend is getting curious. So the chapter headings in this particular chapter, if I looked at it, was density, pressure in a fluid, buoyancy and Archimedes' principle, and fluids in motion. So I want to turn those subheadings into questions. Daniel, do you know why I'd want to turn those into questions?
Just to get a better understanding of what you're going to be reading.
Yep. And it also provides a little bit of motivation. So I could say density, or I could say, well, what is density? And that kind of activates my curiosity. And so suddenly I want to know the answer. I could even write another question. I could say, how does density affect fluids, since fluids is the title of this particular chapter that I'm working with. Or I could say, how does pressure in a fluid affect its density? So if I ask myself questions using the subheadings, or if I ask myself questions based off of the summary topics at the end of the chapter, then that can really, really help me. Again, they call it like prefrontal loading. It's a way to just activate your curiosity to get you motivated to read, aside from just, oh, I have to do this because my teacher told me to. I kind of demonstrated this already, so I'll do it again. Section 13.3, the subtitle was Buoyancy and Archimedes' Principle. So if I turn that into a question, I would say, what is Archimedes' Principle? And I would say, what's buoyancy? How does buoyancy affect fluids? I don't know, another sub, we'll see. Or I'm gonna flip to the end of the chapter. And the summary at the end, there are 5 points altogether. The first point says, density, specific gravity, and pressure are defined quantities that are important in fluid states and dynamics. So I know that I need to probably figure out what's density, what's specific gravity, and I'm sure that's something different than the idea of, you know, stuff falls, and pressure, and I probably need to know what those vocabulary terms are. So I know that before I even flip through and check for the vocabulary words. Okay. I think at this point we'll skip. I normally would have students do that with their reading textbook, whatever they had handy, but I'm going to just move on, and hopefully this demonstration was a little bit helpful. But before we even read, we're asking ourselves questions, we're kind of preparing for reading, and now we're going to actually read. So you want to find the answers to the questions that you created. So you want to write down those questions, maybe in your notes, and then as you read, try to find those answers, okay? I recommend taking it in sections. So as we flip through that again, I know I'm flipping back and forth a lot, sorry. We noticed that section 1 was really short. So I could possibly, okay. I noticed that chapter 1 was really short, or excuse me, section 1. So maybe I don't want to just save that for one day. I know that section 13.2 was really, really, really long, so I might consider trying to break that up. I would count how many pages there are and try and take it in however many sections I wanted to. But that's up to you as a student to figure out what you want to do. So take it in sections, but when you read it, start with that first section that you decide, but don't take any notes as you read. Daniel, why do you think I would say don't take notes the very first time?
Because you don't have a full view of understanding yet.
Absolutely.
So you don't know what's important.
Exactly. The very first time we read something, it's all brand new information. So if I try to figure out while I'm reading, then it's not going to be very helpful to me. One of my bad habits as a reader is I want to highlight what I think is important, but if I don't follow this advice, then my entire page is going to be yellow, and that's not going to help me for studying, okay? Instead, what I'll do is maybe I'll read the first section. I'll read, stop. And then I go back. And then I will try to figure out the main points. Then I'll do my highlighting, my note-taking, because it's so much easier once I've found a stopping point to figure out the main points and the supporting details. And of course, I want to try to answer my questions. I want to try to figure out, okay, my earlier question was, what is density? Well, it's probably here. Oh, there's even an equation for it, so it's not just a vocabulary term. I bet you some of these vocabulary terms are going to be important. It talks about this huge, it's got this huge graph. So those are going to be important, and I want to try and answer those pre-reading questions. Summarizing what I read, trying to find the most important key points. Sometimes that does require a second read. So some students say read some people will say read thoroughly the first time, which is what I'm recommending, and then going back and finding the important points. Sometimes students find it helpful to do the exact opposite, skim it first and then read it in depth. Whatever works for you as a student, find out what works best and utilize that, okay? And you want to do that for each section because immediate summarization in small chunks, that really helps solidify your understanding. Because if I just kept going at the end of section 3.1 and just kept going until I was done, then it would be much harder for me to organize that information in my head. So stopping to do a miniature summarization can help a lot with absorbing all this dense material. And that's physics book dense, haha. Okay. Going deeper, yes, bold-faced materials, the vocabulary words that are a little bit darker than all the other words. Yes, those are obviously important, but if there's another phrase out there, just because there's a word out there that's not bold-faced does not necessarily mean that I shouldn't remember it. So if I'm reading and I come across a word that I don't know, well, then I need to take note of it and I need to figure out what that definition is, especially if it's used more than once. So do not let boldface blind you to searching out the meaning of other vocabulary words, okay? When you do come across a word that you're not familiar with, such as if I'm looking at the word, maybe I don't know what the word, maybe for some reason I don't know what osmium is, right? Maybe I don't know what this word osmium is in the textbook. Okay, well, it's not bold, so I'm not just going to skip it. It's really tempting just to skip it and try and figure it out. But if I come across it again and again, then I need to take note of it, and then when I'm done reading my section, go back, figure out what that word is, and then read the paragraph again so that I know what this new vocabulary word and incorporate it into my meaning. Okay? Common paragraph patterns is another important thing to think about. Okay, so some textbooks are going to have a specific way. All textbooks are going to have some sort of pattern. If you can figure out that pattern, then you can kind of predict what's going to happen next. And that's more than just subtitles and pictures. Some textbooks will ask a question and get you curious, and they'll say, well, we tried this, and then they come across the main idea. Some textbooks will give you the really important topic, really important point, and then they'll give a detail, an example, and they'll give another example, and they'll give another example in a case study. So just figuring out what that pattern is can help you figure out what you're going to learn next. Even if you don't know exactly what the material is, you can figure out the type of material. And again, that's really important for organizing and categorizing what you're reading. Okay. More study tips. When I say divide up your reading, that means that you don't want to start reading the day before it's due. Now, I've done that before. I know a lot of students do that. It's common. We all do that. But if you can't, it's really difficult. It's really difficult when we do that, because then you're not transferring that information into your long-term memory. You're just remembering it for the test tomorrow, and then you're going to forget it. And that's not going to be helpful for the end of the quarter quiz. That's not going to be helpful for when you need this information for the next class that you're taking or the next chapter that you're taking. So it's good to try and have all this information right away. So let's say, for example, that it's Monday, and you have a reading assignment that's due on Friday. So, of course, we don't want you to start reading on Thursday, but I might say, okay, I'm going to read Section 1 and part of Section 2 on Monday, referring to maybe my physics textbook, Chapter 13. And then maybe I'll finish Section 13.2 on Wednesday and start Section 13.3 on Wednesday, or, you know, I'll divvy it up somehow so that I'm starting reading on Monday and I'm almost done with all the reading material Thursday night or Friday morning. Doesn't have to be even, because our schedules are not always, you know, even as well. So work with what your schedule has and divvy it up. Now, some people might say, oh, Connie, but if I start reading on Monday and the quiz or the exam is on Friday, I'm not going to remember what I read on Monday because that was 4 days ago. I used to have that trouble myself until I did what's called the pre-re-review. So what that happens is, if I'm assigned the chapter on Monday, and it's due on Friday. So I read on Monday, I read whatever section I've designated for myself. Then on Tuesday night, before I read that reading, I go back to Monday's notes, and I just skim the highlighted pieces. I just reactivate that stuff that I read last night. And then on Wednesday, before I read that night's reading, I go back and I read the notes for Monday and I read the notes for Tuesday. So by the time Friday morning rolls around, I'll have known Monday's material several times because I've read it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And the material that I read just the night before is still fresh in my head. So being able to do that really, really helps you, again, absorb that material on a more permanent basis. Bonus hint. Your professors sometimes can tell you what you need to know. So if I was taking this class and I would ask my physics professor, what's the most important part of this chapter, or what parts should I focus on as I'm reading? Sometimes professors or instructors will say, oh, yeah, you should really focus on blah, 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 blah. Or they might say, it's all important. And that doesn't help you much, but it never hurts to ask. And sometimes just asking that type of question, it lets instructors know, I care about this class, I'm working hard, I'm trying to figure it out, and they'll work with you. Throughout this workshop and this webinar, after giving this presentation a lot, I've learned a lot from other students. I mean, I have my studying techniques. I have done research and read all the books on things that help students with their studying tips, but I've also gotten a lot of feedback from other students who are willing to share their thoughts. So things like when you're studying and when you're reading, there's a lot of cool things you can do. You can give yourself mini rewards for completing sections. I had one friend back in college, every 5 pages she would stick a $1 bill into her textbook. So she'd read, oh, look, $1, and then she would rush to the vending machine, and that was her reward for having finished every 5 pages. Sometimes if you're a more active person, you can do like every 15 minutes, go get up and go run for 2 minutes or go do 15 push-ups. I know sometimes my reward is that I get to go surf on Reddit for 5 minutes or I can do 1 level on my favorite phone app game, as long as I set myself a timer, because otherwise. A lot of times people say to associate different objects, music, or colors to the related material, and there's a couple of different ways you can do that. So some students choose to color code their notes by saying, okay, section 1 is pink, section 2 is orange, section 3 is yellow. Other students might say, okay, well, if this is a really important topic that I know is going to be on the test, that's 1 color. If it's a supporting detail or an example of something, of a main idea, then that's another color, and vocabulary is another color, and blue is the section I don't know yet. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. The most recent time that I did this workshop, one student said that she would chew different flavors of chewing gum for her section. So she associated flavors with different information, and I thought that was genius. That was really cool. I'd never, ever heard of associating textures or flavors with information, so the more you know. I had another student, he said anytime he had a math class, he was more of an artistic person. He was more very creative. And what he would do when he really, really, really needed to memorize some equations and use that is that he would draw. He would draw a picture. He would draw a comic because he was artistically inclined. And in the lines of all of his artwork, he would incorporate the equations, the algebraic equations, and some of the rules that he had to memorize and utilize for his upcoming test. He said it took forever. He said it took up a lot of my time, but every time he did that, he aced his test. So that was another really creative way that I thought was worth sharing. Sometimes location. So you can say, okay, I'm going to read 1 section on the bus, 1 section at the gym, 1 section in the laundry room. Or if you're not quite as mobile, you can say, I'm going to read 1 section in this corner of my bedroom. I'm going to read section 2 on my bed. I'm going to read section 3 in my kitchen, read section 4 somewhere else. But what's really important is using other resources to learn more. So if I'm struggling with a concept that's in this particular textbook and I just don't get it, then IET is another resource. This textbook is not the only thing that's important. I mean, we live in a world where we carry all of the information in our pockets, in our phones. So we can look up this stuff on the internet. Maybe there's a video or a webinar or some sort of blog that explains the concept a little bit better. Maybe there's a TED Talk on this concept or another, some other lecture. Maybe my classmate or my teacher has a better source or another book that can explain this concept better. Whatever it takes to get this information in your head. And the last thing that I have is to know also when you're studying to know when to take a break. If you find yourself reading something over and over and over again and you're not getting it, that's your brain telling you to stop, that it's not going to happen. And when I mean that, I'm saying, I'm not saying, oh, you're never going to get it. It means you're not going to get it at this point. Go do something else, clear your mind, and then come back to it, because otherwise it's a waste of time and that's inefficient. So knowing when to take a break is just as important as knowing how to study. My recommendation is about a quarter of the time that you've been studying. So if you've been studying for an hour, take a 15-minute break. If you've been studying for 2 hours straight, take a half-hour break. If you've been studying for 10 minutes and you're losing focus, give yourself a 2-minute break. And yes, there have been times when I have to take a 2-minute break every 10 minutes because I am that worn out, but it works. At this point, I would normally ask everybody what study tips they have to share that I can move in. So, Daniel, do you have any study tips that you would like to share with the world?
Honestly, no, because I haven't been in school for quite a few years, and this is the first time I'm back into it. So I'm using this as more of a, try to re-familiarize myself with, good studying tips. So.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me about any of the tips that I've mentioned? I know I've been talking pretty much straight through. What questions do you have for me about anything regarding textbooks?
Actually, you've been very clear on it. I really don't have anything.
Okay. Well, I think that's all that I have. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Hopefully these tips can help both you and our other viewers for future textbook adventures. Jennifer, do you have anything that I might have left out?
Yeah, online students typically have a lot of articles to read aside from textbooks. I mean, they always do have a textbook typically with their class. Sometimes they don't actually, but they're having a lot of online material to read and a lot of articles. So I think a lot of the principles would be similar, though.
Well, sometimes, yeah. The note-taking might be a little bit more difficult. So instead of being able to annotate right on the text, I might be able to use some of the highlighting applications for that can help. Or sometimes just taking notes by hand whenever you're, and for me, that's a huge challenge for me sometimes, is not having that tactile physical textbook. But but I also understand that I can't always. E-books can be a godsend when it comes to my back. Let's see here.
Yeah, because they have a lot of interactive materials as well.
Yeah. I would still say that creating questions from subtitles and headings, and if it's an article or a text that doesn't have very many subtitles, what you can do is you can read the first and the last sentence of the paragraph and use that as a previewing trick, and hopefully that can give you an idea of what's going to read. So again, reading before you read. If there's nothing to read before this huge wall of text, try reading the first and last sentence of the paragraph. Try reading the introduction first and then the summary or the ending paragraph, just to kind of get a head start for stuff. And whatever tactile, I mean, when it comes to reading online, it's all just a screen. So whatever you can do to make it a little bit more tactile, if you have, you know, a squishy ball to squeeze while you're reading a certain section, or if you have the privacy of your own room, reading it out loud can be very helpful. Sometimes when you are taking notes, if you're not somebody who likes to write down things a lot, then using technology to record your voice notes. So instead of writing down your notes and writing down a miniature outline, if that doesn't work for you, then, you know, pull out a voice recorder from a smartphone and say, okay, well, I'm reading chapter 13 and this part doesn't make sense to me, but I think it's connected to this and this, and then that way you have audio notes. That can be helpful. Yeah, okay, that's a good suggestion. And no matter what, whatever works, if you have a system that works, great, keep doing it. If you are looking for something and some of the tips that I have are not working for you, I'm not offended, go find something else. The key is to keep looking until you find a system that works for you. And being mindful of it, you know, kind of ask yourself, well, is this working for me? Am I still unsure about a lot of things? Is this helpful or is this not helpful? What can I do differently? What can I do better? And again, resources like the Academic Success Center has a lot of workshops and study tips if you're looking for a system for studying. That's great. That's all I have for now.
That's a great resource.
Yes, very much. Anytime you have any questions about that, come check out our website or call with the numbers on the website, or email, or we'll do whatever we can to help you out there. Great. Daniel, thanks for coming. Thank you for attending. Yes.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Have a great day.
All right, you too.